Welcome to my storybook, Dollhouse Renovation. This is just an overview of how I got to this point. When I first got the dollhouse, she was in a sad state. She'd been exposed to the elements, and there was not a huge amount left of her other than the structure. The floors were in really rough shape. So to repair them, I used an old technique where you glue tissue paper, crumpled up tissue paper, throughout the damaged areas, which for this dollhouse was pretty much all the floors and the walls. I used a white glue, crumpled up tissue, I only had pink on hand, and glued that to all the surfaces. The roof had been cleared of all the shingles, so I had a clean slate to work with. As you can see, the floors were in rough shape. There was residue from old paint. It had been electrified at one point. So the tissue paper added a really strong barrier. When the tissue and glue dries, it dries very hard. And I did several layers of this, which with a wet paintbrush, you can poke into all the little corners and crevices. And this helps to hide and fill in all the cracks or spaces that are between warped walls, floors, any imperfections it hides. As I said before, when it's dry, it's really nice and hard, so it takes paint beautifully. This was a saving attribute of using the tissue paper. It made all the difference in the world. The wallpaper that was left over from the previous owners was a paper wallpaper, so it was porous. So I was able to even go over that with several layers of the tissue paper. I didn't have to rip it off. Now, if it was a plastic or vinyl type wallpaper, I would have had to really work at taking it off prior to. But in this case, I was able to just go straight in with the tissue paper. Eventually, I painted the walls. Once the tissue was all dry, I painted all the walls white with just a regular acrylic white paint. All the windows and doors had been removed, so there was really just walls, a roof, and a base that I was working with. I knew I had plans for the future. I kind of knew that I wanted to create a vintage style storybook house. I knew what I wanted the roof to look like, so I wanted the interior to match, and I needed a clean slate to be able to do that. Once all the tissue paper was laid down, was dry, and the whole house had been painted white, I was then able to go in and build up on that base. And I did that with a very, very thin layer, which you'll see coming up, a very thin layer of plaster. Here you can see what's left of the wallpaper. I was able to get it off the side walls, but this back wall was next to impossible, so I just used tissue paper over it. Now this is the Pierce Dollhouse by Greenleaf, and when I'm done with it, I rearrange the rooms for different purposes. Not rearrange them, it's not like I was moving the rooms, I just repurposed each room. The tiny little attic at the top on the third floor. This space was for a master bedroom, and you'll see what I do with it in subsequent videos. But all the little spaces and nooks and crannies, you can see some of the cracks between where the ceiling on the roof line joins up with the walls. All that was repaired and filled in with the tissue paper. All the windows had been taken out, but I did save all the pieces so that I could repurpose them. The first floor, which was in the worst condition of all, I knew I wanted to do something different with it. When I took out the stairwell, the staircase that was in the middle, it just took up too much room. I decided, okay, that's what I wanted, was a big open room. Here you can see just a little glimpse of what the roof looked like as I was building it. Now, I did do a separate video that shows an overview of how the whole roof came about. Here you can see at different stages of laying all the shingles, hundreds and hundreds of them, that took over 100 hours to do the roof. And there's the vision that I had, was my storybook vision. So now you're looking at the interior of the house after it had been painted throughout, all painted white. And after the first coat of paint went on, I decided it still needed something more. And that's when I decided to apply the texture. So I got a tub of plaster, drywall plaster, from the hardware store, and using an old credit card, I scraped it on very thin throughout the whole house, exterior and interior. You can just see a little bit of the texture that it leaves behind. It's a very pretty texture. And because of the tissue paper base, it grabbed a hold of it really nicely. Then I decided to hand paint faux stone floors on the first floor. I thought this would be a really wonderful backdrop for my country kitchen. On the third and second floors, I added lots of wood trim. This helped to differentiate each room and give it a finished look. On the first floor, I also added wooden beams. I added the beams to the ceiling, to the walls, and in certain strategic places on the outside edge of the rooms. This made it look as if this was all part of this structure. Here you can see when I started reusing the bits and pieces that I had salvaged from the windows, I just added new glass inserts. And I'll talk about that in a subsequent video. Here you can see the windows have been installed and the new stone floor in place. I also created a ladder to go up into the second floor. So this is leaving the kitchen, going up onto the second floor. On the outside of the house, you can see how effective the new windows look with the light shining through. I used a different technique on the inserts so it looked like antique glass. Here and there, I also added mossy bits to the exterior part of the stone, and I carried that moss and a little bit of greenery onto the outside of the house as if it was growing up the walls of the house. It makes a big difference, especially as you can use it to hide little imperfections, add interest. I used it up onto the roof as well. In between the shingles, I tucked little bits and pieces of moss, and also on the back porch. You can see how the roof line, which mimics a thatched roof, really adds to the personality and the character of the whole house. I stained all the shingles once I was finished with the same color stain so that all shingles look the same. On the second floor, I also finished off the holes where the floor, the stairwell goes from one floor to the other. I added little wood moldings to the outside edge of the floor as well as the little openings. This adds a nice finishing touch. On the top floor, you can see how the little openings get framed in with small pieces of timber, which accentuates these openings, but adds that finishing carpentry look. There you can see on the third and second floor how all the edges have been trimmed with wood trim. And the final touch was this wonderful owl, an old gentlemanly owl that I added on top of the domed roof. And there the renovation was complete